A warm welcome to Business Daily right here on Trust TV. I am Yusuf Akogo. Now, NBC upgrades Nigeria tax to GDP ratio to 10.86%. Of course, this is for 2021, for 2010 to 2021, as the case may be. The upgrade, of course, is an increase of 6.0% from the earlier report by the GDP. And of course, Nigeria also made 927.2 billion trade surplus in the first quarter of 2023. That is also according to the report from NBS. Of course, in the report, NBS said Nigeria total exports stood at 6.49 trillion naira, and while imports stand at 5.56 trillion naira. That is a huge number there from NBS. Of course, if you look at the number of top 5 export destinations of by Nigeria in that year 2023, you have the likes of Netherlands that account for 12.91%, and of course the US 8.93%, Spain 7.53%, and of course France at 7.1%, while India recorded 7.04% in terms of export, a destination of export from Nigeria. Of course, the items that we have exported to some of these countries are mostly petroleum, bitumen, and of course liquefied natural gas as well. But in terms of imports, of course, what we have exported from some of these some of the countries that we have exported more from, we have the like of China, the Netherlands, Belgium, India, and the USA, were the top 5 importing countries rather from that Nigeria has imported from over this period under review. This is a very, very well, I don't want to say whether it's impressive or not, but again, quite a whole lot needs to be done in the Nigerian economy, as the case may be. Again, welcome to Business Daily. I am Yusuf Akogo. We take a quick break. When we come back, we go into our discussion.
Now, as part of efforts to support Africa's goal of strengthening...
Now, looking at the activity chart, as you can see right here, a total volume of 130...
A Boko Haram crisis that at that time was restricted to Yobe.
How secure are they? You can see security men with blood.
This is the road leading up to the...
Already, if you look at English squad, you are looking at EPL, you are looking at their names. You are not looking at...
Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
Welcome back. It's still Business Daily right here on Trust Television. Of course, we are going into our discussion now, which centers around still again subsidy removal and of course the inefficiency of the Nigeria energy sector. And I have my guest right here in the studio, Engineer Michael Uluwagbemi, founder and of course executive partner, Loft-In Group, board member representing Southwest on the board of Rural Electrification Agency. Glad to have you.
It's a pleasure.
In the studio.
Nice to
Is Nigeria energy sector effective enough? Why are we having all these challenges?
Nigeria energy sector, like every other sector, is in a, I would say, is in a state of development. We're a developing country. But the truth also is that we can do a whole lot better. I mean, you were talking about the trade statistics. While, of course, on the surface of it, we have a trade surplus. We are exporting more than we are importing.
Importing, absolutely.
But the quality of the exports speaks a whole lot to our level of development. When you look at the statistics, about 6.1 or 5.1 of the 6.1 billion dollars in that fourth quarter was from crude oil, and other petroleum products was another 400 billion. So meaning that almost 5.5 of the 6.1, which is roughly about 90%, is all raw. And then you look at the other raw part of it, agricultural products, still raw. So manufactured goods was less than $65 billion in an entire, so less than 1% of our entire exports is manufactured goods.
Absolutely.
We are exporting opportunity and we
Jobs.
are importing poverty. So we are not any different from our forefathers that used to export slaves and then import colonizers. So you export raw material, raw people, and then you bring in colonialists to come and administer your country. The generation after them exported palm oil, raw kernel, and then imported palm oil and soap. So and now we are exporting crude oil, agricultural products, and we are importing manufactured goods, machinery. So we need to change the dynamics. And I think that if you look at the next first quarter, not this particular one, maybe the one of 2024, just one project will begin to allow Nigeria to change that dynamics. And that's the Dangote refinery and maybe the NNPC refinery that will join it. We will at least be able to halve our crude oil export and move it from crude oil exports to manufactured petroleum products. That's the way it should be.
Developing the value chain.
Exactly. So let's move away from exporting raw crude oil, which was about $5.1 billion. And let's move it, half of that, let's halve it. Let's say Dangote is able to take 600,000 barrels per day. The NNPC one can take 400,000, you know, or maybe 200,000. That's about half of our current export, which is about 1.65 million barrels a day, including condensates. So if we're able to halve that export, take it away from $5.5 billion and we turn it to $2.75 billion of crude oil, then the balance we turn into manufactured product, which will be more valuable. That 2.75 is no longer going to be 2.75 balance. It's now going to be closer to another $5 billion. That is how you begin to improve the quality of your export while also improving the value of your export. And that's what we need to do, at least in the petroleum sector. When you now talk about our energy, overall energy sector, which also includes electrification, power. Nigeria has a lot of opportunity to export power. Our neighbors in Cameroon do not have power. Our neighbors in Ghana, but first, what are we even doing to our own power sector?
Exactly.
So there's a whole lot we can do in terms of developing our energy sector so that it can be responsive to developing a new economy. But that new economy will have to be built on value addition instead of just rent-seeking and racketeering, which is what we call subsidy.
Interesting. You talked about this this issue of exports that looking at the NBS statistics that was released yesterday, and look at some of the countries that we're actually exporting to, the lack of Netherlands, the US, Spain, and of course France. If you look at in terms of value of what we export to this country, how will you quantify it?
Yeah, the value of what we're exporting per capita is poor. I mean, if you're telling me $6 billion of export, that means for an entire country of 200 8 million people, maybe 230 million, some people say. You are exporting in a year $25 billion worth of goods. That is very, very poor, right? $25 billion worth of goods for an economy of $500 billion. That means as a country, we are only exporting the component of the export relative to our GDP is less than 5%. That is bad. When you're in the Committee of Nations, the question is, what are you contributing to the global economy? What is Nigeria providing to the world? We're only providing $25 billion worth of goods, and we are 208 million people. We should be providing the world's manufactured petroleum products. We should be providing the world power, because we have rivers, we have sunlight, we have gas, we have crude oil. We should be providing the world manufactured goods. We should be providing the world creative products, technology. This is what Nigeria, if we look into ourselves, should be producing for the world. So as a relative, we have a surplus on the surface of it, because the value of what we're exporting is more than what we're importing. And even the import is even sacrilegious. If your economy is growing, you do not import final goods. What you import is what we call intermediate goods. You bring in chemicals. You bring in things that you need to catalyze growth. You bring in technology, IP products, in order to catalyze the growth inside. So the quality of our imports is even more sacrilegious. So the combination of the quality of our import and the quality of our export, if you look at it on the surface of it, it looks okay, yeah, you are balancing the books. But export and import is not an arithmetic equation. It is more complicated. So the quality of what is going on inside is what we should focus on. And for us, we are not pulling our weight. We are the biggest economy in Africa. We are the largest black nation in the world. We are the richest black nation that mankind has ever known. We must pull our weight in the world as one of the top 30 economies in the world and contribute something, because the world needs Nigeria. We have the brain, we have the capacity, we have the resources. We must export more manufactured products. We must export more technology. We must export more creative products. We must export more machinery. This is what we need as a country.
But the question now is, like you said, we are a country with so much, but yet we are laboring in what I call, is it shortage or perennial shortage?
We are majoring in minors. We are majoring in minors.
Absolutely. How do we get out of this wood?
First and foremost, you have to invest in your people. It is a mistake that for the last 20, 30, 40 years, we continue to invest in fuel, something you burn, instead of taking that same money and investing it in education. You cannot turn around this export story if you do not invest in your education system. Such as people that manufacture. When you look at the 4 factors of production, you have land, you have capital, you have labor, and you have entrepreneurship. 2 of the 4 are people. So if we do not invest in our people, in our education system, such that our children can manufacture something for the world, so that the world will look for what Nigeria made in Nigeria, then we're in trouble. Because we will continue to exist in an arithmetic surplus, but we will not add any value to the rest of the world. We have a big economy because we have massive amount of people, number of people, but those people must be productive. You can only be productive when you are educated, you can only be productive when you are healthy, and you can only be productive when you are now provided with the tools, your infrastructure. Those are the 3 things we should be investing in, and then you secure that population. So you must have health, education, security, and infrastructure. And we should move, and that is what the president has done, to move our balance sheet towards spending on what is important, instead of spending on the few at the detriment of the many, instead of majoring in minors. Why are we spending money to subsidize Cameroon, Chad, Niger, Benin? These countries do not contribute to our GDP numbers. These countries do not contribute to our labor statistics. These countries I just mentioned do not add anything to the bottom line of Nigeria. We should be investing in Nigerian people. How can you justify spending $10 billion on subsidy last year, and then you spent less than $5 billion combined, education, health, infrastructure, security, combined.
Absolutely.
The entire capital budget of Nigeria was 5 trillion naira inside this budget, but we budgeted 5.5 trillion for fuel subsidy for half a year. That means if you do it for the entire year, you're looking at 11 to 12 trillion naira.
That's more than half of the budget.
And then we did capital budgets of 5 billion, 5 trillion.
That's more than half of the entire budget.
It was scandalous. It was sacrilegious. And that is what the president has said. No, we need to invest in Nigerian children. 10 to 12 million Nigerian children are out of school. That is, we are manufacturing bandits, criminals that will come and torment us in our retirement age. Instead of us to send those children back to school by investing in their education, by investing in their healthcare, by investing in their security, by investing in infrastructure, to pull Nigeria from the 20th century into the 21st century, we were busy buying fuel and making some very few cartel or cabal rich at the expense of Nigeria. So I think we are beginning to move in the right direction. We need to also remove some other subsidies. We have bandit subsidy. Bandit subsidy is the subsidy that we give to those people who are in the rural, in Niger Delta, who are stealing our crude oil, or in Zamfara stealing our gold, or in Elisha stealing our gold and our lead and our diamond. That's bandit subsidy. The federal government must send the security agents, they must flush all of them out, because that money is not meant for these guys. It's meant for Nigerian children, to put them in school, to feed them, to send them, to give them good education and healthcare, to secure them, to build roads, bridges. This is what that is meant for. After that bandit subsidy, there's a lot of subsidies we need to remove from this. FX subsidy is there. How can some people will sit in their bedroom.
But are all these subsidies not as a result of failure of governance over the years?
It is a result of lack of political will, which is what this president does not lack. You must be ready to look at people in their eyes and say, I'm going to govern in the interest of the majority. I'm elected by Nigerians to govern, not so that everybody will thrive. Is to give everybody a chance to thrive. Not that everybody will thrive, but a chance to thrive. But if I make a decision, the question is, I will put it on a scale. Who benefits most and who benefits least? If I can benefit more people than those people who do not benefit, then I've made the right decision. It might be difficult. No decision, every decision has winners and losers. So I think the courage, the political courage, to make the difficult decision is what President Tinubu has already displayed. And I think it is high time Nigeria be set on the path of prosperity and expansion, and that starts with taking away all the waste and subsidies that I've mentioned, subsidy of FX, subsidy of fuel, subsidy of bandits. This is what we need to get rid of, and then start allocating that money to what Nigeria really needs. Invest in Nigerian children, invest in our healthcare, invest in our security, invest in our infrastructure, and then all boats will rise. And when all tides rise, all boats rise, and Nigeria is better for it. Everybody will be more prosperous.
Absolutely. I think another bandit again that subsidy again that we need to take out, I think, is from our refinery as well. We have about 4 refineries that are not working, but yet we spend money annually to do what we call turnaround maintenance in some of these refineries.
Absolutely.
Why can't we sell them to investors?
I think the Port Harcourt refinery already shows what we need to do. A refinery is a massive engine. Unfortunately, across the world, refineries don't break down. What you do is you retool, you expand. Over time, you grow their capacity and they can do more. But rather than doing that, just like the way we did our other assets that were then managed by the then NNPC, we watched as 4 refineries grounded to a halt. Nigeria has another more than 5,000 kilometers of pipeline system, by the way, with depots and everything. That one also, halt, is not working today. So we need to look inside ourselves and say, is government in the best position to run business? Or should these businesses actually be out there for the private sector to manage? Port Harcourt Refinery is already taking on a Project SPV model, where they actually borrow money from Afri-Exim to fix it, and then that Project SPV owns it. We should take it further. After the Project SPV runs it and owns it and returns the money that was borrowed to fix it, that Project SPV should be taken public, so that we take this away from bureaucrats. It's the same way we have to take our railways that have been built in the last 2 to 3 years, after Nigerian Railway Corporation destroyed our entire railway system, and we are still living it with them. It makes no sense. We should quickly concession and privatize these assets so that Nigerians do not watch their heritage being frittered again by some cabal of public servants or bureaucrats. That is not what we need. Government should be in the process or in the job of making policies. Government should be in the job of providing incentives, tax incentives, capacity, security, infrastructure. That's the work of government. But even the component of infrastructure, security, health, and education that I've mentioned, that can be run by the private sector, government should let private sector run it, so that private sector can create jobs, so that private sector can expand the economy, so that we don't look back, so that there can be accountability, so that the same person that is operating is not the same person regulating. If government is the one regulating, then there's accountability. Because the private sector will have to operate and report back to government and make sure that they make money.
What about the corruption in the system? There's so much, especially in the oil sector, like you said. Do you think the president can actually succeed in this move that he has started? Taking out subsidy, well, it's a very bold decision that he has taken. But again, we see some of the people that are benefiting from this cartel, as the case may be, may also want to fight back.
They will fight back. I mean, that's why the president is not just a president. He's the president and commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He has the sole monopoly of violence that is validated and allowed by the state. We gave him that power. So it's not for, there's a reason why it's GCFR. And that is why. So that he can use the violence of the state against those people who are undermining the state. So they will fight back, and we expect them to. Some of them are already throwing around propaganda. Some of them have gone to labor to try to rile up labor but the president has stood his ground. The Nigerian people have voted for him because he did not. And everybody say, oh, by the way, some people, they tried to remove the subsidy in the past. How come some people opposed it and now they are for it? No, it was different. This president campaigned on removing subsidy. Before, nobody campaigned on removing. What they will do is that they will win election. Then after their friends have used subsidy money to help them to win election, they will now come back and tell Nigerian people should come and pay for the money that their friends stole. And that's why Nigerians resisted them in 2011. You know what I mean?
Okay, you think that was the case?
This time around, the president stood and said, look, you people can protest from money tonight. I will remove the subsidy. And guess what? I will win the election. And he did. And after he has won the election, the Nigerian people gave him the mandate. And he's only doing what he has promised. So I think the most important thing is that Nigerians should focus on the palliatives or the intervention. The palliatives is temporary. Intervention is more permanent. For example, what interventions can we bring to rural electrification? The agency on whose board I sit. Because in the rural areas, they use generator because they don't have power to fuel. Their power, in order to provide the power for them, in order for them to even process the food that all of us eat, the gari we eat and all of that, they use generator and all of that to provide the heat. How do we help them move away from that? How does the REA step in and provide off-grid, mini-grid power so that the rural areas can now continue to do what they are doing almost for free because sunlight is free? Those are the steps that we need to focus on. The president has talked about sending a jobs and prosperity bill to the Senate and the House of Rep. What goes inside that jobs and prosperity bill? How do we expand the wages of workers, government and non-government, so that everybody can share in the prosperity that is coming to Nigeria? So we should stop focusing on the us of subsidy is dead. The Nigerian people voted for it to die. The former president signed the law for it to die in 2021. And now we have voted for it and it is dead and gone forever. But since Nigerians should move forward.
But since it was the subsidy was removed, the ripple effects is actually there on the street.
Absolutely.
Nigerians are actually feeling the impact. And of course, you recall that Labour engaged the government on the same issue, and they are still meeting later this month as well. Don't you think there's likely going to be a reversal?
There can never be a reversal. The law, the PIA already says you cannot have subsidy. The Appropriation Act provided for subsidy to be paid by government to NNPC.
But why did they?
And there's no money.
Why didn't the former president implement the PIA?
He was philosophically against removing the subsidy, but provided for it to be paid for in the Appropriation Act. But the Appropriation Act does not have money because all the money have gone. There's no money. So at this point, what do you want the president to do? The law says I cannot pay, and even if another law says I should provide money to pay it if I can, but there's no money. The president cannot turn himself to money. So what the president has said is that we have to live with the consequences of our bad decisions in the past. However, what will happen is that because the subsidy has been removed, the balance sheets will now balance. Nigerians have to understand, you cannot on one hand say you want to have fuel subsidy and then abuse the former president for borrowing. It doesn't make sense. He was borrowing because he was paying subsidy. Now we will not borrow anymore. Now the money is now available for us to invest in our people. The subsidy alone is 11 trillion. Do you know what the budget deficit was for this year's budget.
11.34 trillion.
Does the budget not balance automatically? It balances. We've not even removed the FX subsidy. The FX subsidy is another subsidy. That one is another 40%. Out of the 40%, that's another 15 trillion.
Absolutely.
A banditry subsidy, the one that we are losing gold, lead, diamond, oil to thieves and thefts all around Nigeria, that's another 10 trillion. Nigeria will be running a 5 to 10 trillion budget surplus if we remove these three subsidies.
Okay, what framework do you think government should put in place now going forward to achieve some of these, I mean, the plan, as the case may be, in, turning the subsidy money into a more productive
First,
sector?
I think the biggest framework the president has mentioned is to send the bill for jobs and prosperity to the
But is it just enough to send bill?
It's enough, because that's the work of the president. President is the executive. He's invested with the power of the Nigerian...
But it seems to have so many bills have been passed.
Yeah, but this bill is specific.
But the implementation has not really been visible for ordinary man.
Well, the appropriation acts year on year, at least under the previous president, has usually been implemented 80 to 90%. The COVID-19 bill intervention, for example, privy to that, was implemented 99%. Nigerian public service is very good at implementing appropriation bills. So what the president needs to now do is to design, and we need to help him, including the stakeholders, including labor, if they understand what is at stake. Let's come together and now say, okay, because of this stoppage to subsidy, in these three respects, banditry subsidy, FX subsidy, and fuel subsidy, this is the additional money that is now coming to the Nigerian people, to the Nigerian budget. This is the part that is going to states. Of course, on the state level, of course, we should go and fight the fight in our different states as to how our governors spend it. We don't want our governors to fly more private jets and have more wives instead of them investing in Nigerian children, because they have primary responsibility for healthcare and education. Absolutely. We have to remember that our governors have a very good way of filtering away our wealth because they don't have any control. So let us remember that whatever of these subsidies are going to save Nigeria, 55% of it is going to state and local government.
Local government, absolutely.
So we should know that we have a fight to fight at that level.
Absolutely.
I'm putting that aside for those who are watching me. Now, the 45% is what we now have to spend in these jobs and prosperity bill. Where does it go? We can put it in rural electrification so that our rural people have
access to power.
We can put it in infrastructure, put it in education, put it in mass transit.
Engineer Michael, a lot to talk about. Absolutely. But time is not always on our friend.
It's a pleasure.
As the case, I must thank you for coming on Business Daily today. We appreciate your time. Engineer Michael Oluwagbemi is the founder, executive partner, Loft Inc. Group, and of course, board member, Rural Electrification Agency, representing the southwestern part of Nigeria. I must thank you for your time on Business Daily.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. With that, is a wrap on Business Daily today. For some reason, we couldn't bring you update to what is happening at the capital market today, but do stay with us tomorrow. For more, I am Yusuf Akogu.